The canyon country of the desert Southwest is home to some of the most spectacular and colorful scenery on Earth, attracting outdoor enthusiasts from the U.S. and abroad. Many visitors engage in adventurous activities, and with so much steep rock, more and more rock climbers are coming to sample the area's best offerings. Utah's Zion National Park is home to many of the finest big wall climbs in the entire vast region. High-standard technical rock climbing started in Zion only in the late 1960s, with the first ascent of the northwest face of the Great White Throne. But by the end of the century, many excellent big wall climbs had been pioneered. 1,000 to 2,000 foot high routes, such as those found on the north face of Angel's Landing, Moonlight Buttress, Mountain of the Sun, Twin Brothers, the walls of the Court of the Patriarchs, and many others offer high-quality climbing adventure. An hour's drive from the main canyon, the Kolob Canyon section of Zion is a treasure trove of fantastic, colorful, soaring walls, a number of which are still unclimbed. I'm Jeff Lowe. My friends and I did many of the earliest routes, which are now considered classics. But soon Ron Olevsky took over the pioneering role, often climbing solo, establishing numerous great climbs. This instructional program brings Ron and me together to present the techniques we have found to be the most useful in the creation and preservation of high-quality routes for future generations. To facilitate the instruction and its relevance for the viewer, we've chosen 15-year-old Megan Emmons as our student. Megan is an experienced sport and trad free climber, but her experience on aid climbs is limited to shorter routes.
Mexican Hat was my first aid climb experience, and it's this beautiful shroom-shaped climb. It's about 6 bolts long, and I think I ended up setting the new speed record on it for slowest climber. With those 6 bolts, I managed to reach the top in a little over 3 hours. I'm really excited about spending a whole day on the wall because I'll get up there really high and get to see the views in this great park. I'm also kind of nervous about spending a whole day out there because I've never really done a full day climb. I mean, I've hiked in, done a climb and hiked out, and that takes a full day, but never spent a whole day actually on the wall. I can really see myself using the skills that I learned here at Zion, not only to climb big walls here and in Yosemite, but also as an added safety measure in the mountains. There are several instances when I get up in the mountains and bad weather occurs, and it would kind of be nice to have the knowledge and skills to know that I'm okay, I'm still in control of what's going on, even though I'm in the mountains and not on a big wall.
For her first big wall, Ron will lead Megan on an ascent of the first route he completed in Zion. It's a historic climb done in January 1977, which is now called Touchstone, because it became the first Zion wall to be climbed without the use of a hammer. Most of Touchstone follows a single crack system that starts thin and slowly widens as it continues for more than 500 feet up the wall. The last pitch climbs a bolt-protected face to the summit ridge. In this segment, I'll stay behind the camera.
I think one of the reasons this route is popular is because the approach is so short.
Ron and Megan had ridden an early courtesy shuttle up to the climb. The Park Service operates these shuttles at frequent intervals throughout the day, limiting the noise, congestion, and pollution of normal automobile traffic.
Just using one étrier per piece, it's relatively straightforward. Now I'm going to get into my top step and walk around. So that I can lean back I'm not even tied into the anchor and I'm still comfortable. I have lots of control here. I can reach that next bolt easy. Now I'm going to turn on my helmet cam so we can look at this from a different angle. Okay, moving up. Okay, look down. Slide 1 foot loose through the etreae. I'm not even clipped in and I'm holding myself into the wall. No problem. It's hooked right behind there. See that? Now that's a second step, so that's easy to do. Let's go to the 1.5. Once again, locked in, not clipped in, very comfortable, leaning back. After my hammerless ascent, I realized that relying on fixed pins in sandstone is not a very good idea. They tend to loosen and come out after a while, and eventually I installed a pitch to the left of the original first pitch that has a number of bolts on it, but they have the virtue of remaining in place. I had mixed feelings about this, but I think it helps to preserve the route. It certainly gets people started fast, although they complain about the reaches, at least until they see that I'm only 5'6".
Ron Olewski is the son of the great orchestral violinist Julian Olewski. Let's watch Ron's own virtuosity to the accompaniment of his late father's music.
When pitons are necessary, their impact can be mitigated by using constructive scarring. By angling the piton down and in, one can eventually create a wide spot in the crack that is far more conducive for nutting. It's important to bias the removal blows in the upward direction, as this greatly enhances the process. Then you have a spot which will take a nut very well and no longer needs the use of hammered anchors. I started climbing in 1968, and in the early 70s, hardware designs improved with the development of artificial chalk stones. At first, I had to unlearn the use of pitons for protection in free climbing, but after a while, I grew very comfortable with nuts and realized that they're very effective. They may not necessarily always go as deep as pitons, but that doesn't mean they're not as good if they're well placed. Free climbing with them and then starting to do aid climbs with them taught me to be a little bit more sensitive to the nuances and the shape of the crack, looking for wide spots and constrictions where you can settle a nut really well. Placing nuts in sandstone is essentially the same as placing them in other kinds of rock. It's just that because sandstone is inherently weaker, you want to exaggerate the quality of each placement as much as possible. Look for the best spot for the best fitting nut. And try and maximize the amount of contact with the rock. In very narrow placements, rather than using brass nuts, when possible I like to use aluminum nuts that are wider and have a larger face, and thereby do not concentrate the forces as much and are less likely to split out the rock. At first, I assumed that placing nuts in sandstone and using them for aid would have no impact on the rock at all, just as they don't in harder types of rock. But then I discovered on heavily traveled routes that just weighting nuts and removing them causes mild erosion of the placements as they are knocked loose. and after a while the placements begin to pod out. This seems to occur more so when you start using camming devices, which are just a sophisticated kind of nut. Perhaps the moving parts or the leverage exerted by the cams creates more force on the rock, leading to more erosion. This is an issue that we're going to have to be dealing with as climbers if we want to preserve the resource enough to be able to continue to climb for generations.
Beautiful. Off belay! Megan, I'm going to show you the system that I use for Jumaring or ascending the rope. It's a little bit different from some of the other things that I do because generally I like to use equipment that can be multifunctional. You can dismantle it and use it for something else, and I don't like to use stuff that's highly specialized. But in the case of ascending, I like to have dedicated slings right on the ascenders. And a lot of climbers just assemble their system using slings and etriers. But I find that there are enough advantages to having this specialized gear and limited weight in adding to your load that it's well worth doing. And so what I do is I have specific slings on here. One is a stirrup and one is a tie-in loop. And when you're using your Jumars, you should always stay tied in to both of them, even though at times you may be taking one of them off the road. So these Perlon slings you clip into your harness with a locking carabiner and they stay locked in. And one of the advantages here is that they're not fixed into a certain location of the loop like these are. These are your tie-in slings, and you can actually vary where they contact with the ascenders, and that way eliminate wear points, or at least spread out the wear over different points before you have to change them. So, do you understand the purpose here?
Yes.
It's actually pretty much a toss-up whether you want to use the longer one for your left hand or your right hand. But my personal preference is, since I'm right-handed, I use the longer one with my left hand, and that way, even though I tend to favor my right hand when I'm leading, I tend to do as much work overall because you're working a little bit harder with your left arm when you're Jumaring.
Okay, that makes sense.
But you do what you feel comfortable with. So. Give it a good look. Now we've already talked about how when you start out, there's no weight of the rope hanging below you, and you actually have to physically move the cam on the lower one in order to slide it up, and you understand that.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, Megan, I'm going to show you how with my system, it's very easy to just slip right up the road. See how I stop when they're at waist level to clean? And that way I'm not reaching overhead. Now when you get up to the bolts where the rope kind of goes diagonally through, if you stop a few inches short of the bolt, you can sometimes use a little body English to pass it. I'll try and show you on this one. Just like that. We'll try it again.
looks good. You'll find it easier when you get into that third step. The rock. That should get you high enough to reach the bolt. Megan, nicely done.
At the end of the first day's practice, Megan and Ron jumped on the shuttle for a ride back down the canyon.
Okay, Megan, let's go over everything we're going to take up on the wall. Our anchors are going to basically be camming devices or nuts. A lot of what we have has been provided by our sponsors, and it's fine gear, but I use other gear as well, and we're taking some of that with us. Here we have Omega Pacific scallop nuts. We have a bunch of tri-nuts, and these give us a whole variety of size options with a single nut, and so you tend to grab the right one because we have something like 3 dozen nuts here, and you can use the vast majority of that on a single pitch. And as far as camming devices go, we have 21 in a pretty wide range of sizes, but a little bit more heavily in the mediums and the large. And a lot of them are Trango camming devices, the new design, stops, and a wider set, so more stable in the cam, in the crack. Something exciting about this climb, Megan, is we have a historic prototype, one of the earliest spring-loaded camming devices ever made, and I actually used one of these on the first ascent of the route. And now, something like 30 years later, we have another Greg Lowe design, now manufactured by Omega Pacific, and this thing's really exciting. This is the new Link cam, and this has a huge size range. Basically, half the cracks you see, you just have to grab one piece. And of course, one of the most important parts of our primary support system is our web gear. We've got Yates harnesses, and I'm real happy about that. I've been using Yates harnesses for more than 19 years now, and I'm very comfortable in them. We've got Yates etriers, and we've got our 2 ropes. I think it's time to pack the haul bag. Metolius has provided us with this terrific haul bag. This thing is really stout. First item that we want to put in here is basically some protection for the internal contents. So we're going to take both of our sleeping pads, rolled up, stick them in there, and then widen them up so that they're right around the outside. And now we're going to make a bed to set the stuff on using one sleeping bag in the bottom. Now, Megan, I wonder if I can get your help. We've got to load the most critical item here. It's our water, and we've got a whole bunch of little containers so that if one ruptures, we don't lose a lot. I'm glad we double check to make sure all the lids are on securely. Sometimes I even tape them closed. Well, let's see. We've got roughly a gallon per person per day for hot weather. And we want our food bag above that so that we can reach in and grab a snack. We'll have one of these bottles handy in our day pack so that we have some water ready and we can keep refilling it if we want. We're taking a first aid kit also.
Here it is.
Yeah, we want that near the food just as handy. And I have this pullover.
There's that.
And we can line that around the necks of the bottles. Try and stabilize them. We've got our headlamps. They're in a bag, aren't they? One is. I'm going to put both headlamps together right at the top of the food bag. All right, perfect fit. But we're going to find out why this thing's called a pig. No matter how well you pack it, you can't make it lighter. So even though the approach on this is really short, which is what makes it so popular, it wouldn't be a good idea to do it in our climbing shoes. So Solo has been kind enough to provide us with some brand new boots for the approach. As you can see, I'm still wearing my Solos that I had years ago. They're that durable.
I had these shoes from Red Chili, they're the Tornadoes, and I was wondering if these would be okay to use on the wall.
How do they feel on your feet?
Well, they're super comfy for me. I just want to make sure they'll work good.
That's the most important element. So I think those would be good shoes for you to take.
Okay.
So it looks like we've got everything packed up and ready to go. We need to consolidate the hardware so we can carry it on the shuttle, but we're ready. Originally, the second pitch started about 30 feet to the right. So now there's a station set up here. There's a bolt next to the crack, as you can see, and the reason that it's there is the crack kept wearing, even with clean ascents. With the first piece off the belay, it's so critical because of having a fall factor too, that it's now a bolt rather than having the scar get any worse. A locker just for me. Let's see. It's gonna get interesting. Stay with me there. Following aid that is more horizontal is facilitated by removing the ascender stirrups and using the etriers clipped to the anchors in a way that one can still unclip the lead rope. Megan's efforts will be hidden from me under the overhang, but she had no problems with the same maneuver following the traverse on pitch 1. This placement is starting to get so flared out from people using cams that now I can't place a nut, and I'm going to have to use a cam. I actually first managed to climb up to this crack on Christmas Day 1976. It was a real nice Christmas present for me because essentially reaching the crack was the most problematic piece of route finding. Once you got into the crack, boy, it just zoomed all the way. It was beautiful, it was just perfect. I still consider it one of the finest features I've ever found on a route. I clip the etrier beaner directly into the sling of the nut or the wire, as the case may be. This gives me the most reach advantage. I also clip in the protection beaner independently into the same sling. It's on the second pitch, however, that the most aiding on nuts occurs, and it's very alarming to see how the pitch is wearing as a result of several hundred ascents. I think that some compromises are going to have to be made in the future in order to ensure that this particular passage remains viable. Being able to top step has a lot of advantages that go beyond being able to make a bolt or nut reachable. Doing a top step comfortably allows you to get a better view of the next placement. So even if you didn't need to top step, by doing so and seeing that it's a good placement, it actually aids the process. You get a better placement, and sometimes it gives you enough confidence to move more smoothly and make better time. Sometimes when you aid climb, you have to unlearn what you learned in free climbing. You have to learn to see your gear as an extension of your body, and don't hesitate to grab pieces. Sling belays are an easy place to drop very critical items, so you have to be careful, especially where it's so exposed. But everywhere, you should be especially certain that you have a good grip on items and that you have them clipped in properly. Wall hauling devices are nifty little gadgets that are very useful when you're dealing with a substantial weight in the haul bag. And what they mean is that you don't require a pair of ascenders in addition to a pulley in order to arrange your hauling system, and they often save time as well. It's important to have your hauling arrangements in a good position, as high as possible with a clear shot down to the bag, so that the rope isn't bending over something and giving you a lot of friction. It's also important to get enough distance underneath the device so that you can do long strokes so you're not losing as much to the backsliding effect of the cam locking in place. Being able to haul with your whole body weight is sometimes very useful on a heavy bag. The original ascending devices were just a rope camming device with a handle. Their use has opened up vast expanses of rock. However, there's also a substantial amount of danger and over-reliance on a single system such as that, 2 clamps on a rope fixed at one end. And there have been a number of tragic consequences for people taking the safety of these devices too much for granted. Megan was having trouble removing most of the nuts that had been weighted in the process of aid climbing, and I wasn't surprised at all by this. Then I told her about the technique of body yanking, clipping the nut right to your harness and pulling outwards against the rock. Well, it's not using a hammer, so technically it's hammerless, but it's not without adverse effect on the rock and your gear as well. Usually when you're on a wall, you're tied into one end of the lead rope or the other. And so when you're using your ascenders, you have that as a backup. But often people will tie in short in addition, and this is a good idea, because if for some reason you become disattached from the rope, it means you don't fall as far before your backup catches.
Okay, Megan, why don't you pull up a little bit of the lead rope, we'll tie a loop, clip it in here, and then we'll pull up the rest and I'll tie into it. During our ascent, there was a substantial amount of wind, but it's an ever-present factor, and we have to deal with it. The best thing you can do is to carefully manage your rope. So lap coiling your ropes at the belays, not letting them slip over edges or blow in the winds, is a good idea. A lot of the original pin scars are now nut placements. So actually these are nut placements that have been artificially created. However, it's a lot better way to go than using pitons.
Orienting the carabiner crossways like that keeps the sling from pulling the étrier biner inside the crack and making it difficult to grasp as a handhold. Of course, after you take your weight off of it and jiggle it with a rope, the carabiner straightens out the way it's supposed to. At the top of the third pitch, the angle of the climb changes substantially. The initial 3 pitches are very steep. You look straight down to the ground. But at the top of the third pitch, the route becomes what appears to be a crack through a slab. Actually, it doesn't get all that much easier, but the angle changes and so does the atmosphere on the route.
Off belay!
If you're standing around at a belay and you find that you aren't doing anything, you're probably doing something wrong. Because generally there's always something that needs to be done when you're up on a wall. And if it's not organizing the gear or organizing the ropes, then you should take advantage of the time to drink some water or eat some food. Often enough, people bring all the food and water they need on a climb but don't get around to using it. And when you're dehydrated or weak from hunger, you're not going to climb as well.
How you doing?
Getting warm finally.
You mean you were cold at the belay?
My legs were because I can't feel them.
I think I'll have you hang off this one when you get up here until I get off the belay, and then you can move up.
It was a 10, an 11, and one that was too scratched up to see.
One of the nice things about when the angle eases is that it makes it so much easier to stand in your top steps, and you feel so much more secure. This allows you to make long reaches and save on your rack. As you're climbing, when possible, you should always look a few placements ahead and try and plan out your next few moves. Sometimes you'll end up placing a piece only to have to place another real close by because you didn't see that there was going to be a long reach beyond. You save time by looking ahead.
Off belay! Ready?
Ready?
Thank you!
Okay,
Now, you're going left there.
that's what I figured.
So if you put a piece on the right, you're going to get a lot of drag.
Oh, you are a good little camp.
When you arrive at a belay point, it's a good idea to look at the potential for anchors and try to pre-envision the way you're going to set things up. Where you're going to put your hauling system so that you have the straightest shot and the easiest pull. Where you're going to be able to clip your haul bag and other gear where it's going to be accessible. How are you going to be able to back up your anchors? Can you put them in series? Can you equalize them? These are all considerations that you should make before you begin to set up the anchor. It'll often save time.
Run! Off belay! When I get back to science and history, I'm going to be so bored.
All right, let's see. We got a bomb-proof outward pull anchor there. And you're going to want to remain accessible to that. We have the bag up. And by the way, Megan, that was a great job on that lead.
Thanks.
Looks really good. Well, the water, for the most part, we can just keep in the haul bag because we got tons of it. But the other items, you know, stuff like your headlamp,
Yep.
toothbrush, whatever.
Don't call my dentist, but I'm not going to brush my teeth.
And then we probably want the rack up and out of the way so you're not leaning against it, jangling all night. So let's hook it on here. That's not going anywhere. You know, Megan, I think that probably the most comfortable place on the ledge would be lying right out here. This is about the flattest. The tie-in is pretty important. You have to have that the right length. You don't want it to allow you to go over the edge at night if you have a bad dream or do a little sleepwalking or just slide your sleeping bag. Let's see what we got in here. Ooh, ice water is still nice and icy.
That's a welcome sight right now.
I'm afraid you can't have any of this.
I'll stick with my ice water.
We got to this ledge several hours before it gets dark, but I don't want to haul that bag anymore, and we're far enough we can finish the route in the morning. Well, I'm not sure whether it's brighter now or whether it was last night with that full moon.
It woke me up. I was nice and comfortable, too.
Better eat it now before it melts anymore.
It almost looks like mouse droppings on it.
The sixth pitch is actually two pitches right next to each other with a number of places where you can cross back and forth. So there's a number of variations. Originally I climbed up the chimney and continued up the right side, but often people climb on the left. It's a little bit faster than doing the chimney, but a little bit more difficult as well. You look great, Megan.
Good thing you didn't see it from my point of view.
Isn't it a fun pitch?
Yeah, and I finally got some blood. That's what I was going for.
And now you're blooded on walls.
Blooded and blistered. Clipping. Maybe. Okay.
I don't know that I like your braking hand crossing in front of your tie-in there. There you go.
I can do it either way, so.
I think that's much better.
Okay.
I actually had to lead the 7th pitch twice so that Jeff could shoot it. In order to use the helmet cam, I also had to carry a pack to carry the recording deck. Unfortunately, pitch 7 is a very hard pitch to do with a pack. I had to actually sling the pack over one shoulder and carry it across my chest, sort of like a gear sling.
So cool right now.
It was really fun getting to use one of these old original camming devices. If I can just get that pack back on. Woo! I like that. On the final pitch, I climbed up a large ponderosa pine by actually prussicking up the trunk. And then I pendulumed over to the rock wall and climbed up the last few feet to the summit prow. Now, the wall itself is a free pitch. It's actually a face climb, but it required bolts. That took a lot of work, and so for the first few years, everybody that climbed this route had to climb the tree. Now it's a lot easier. Most people who put up routes in sandstone use standard type climbing bolts. Unfortunately, as you drill, the hole tends to flare, and even if the bolt is holding in the back, it can wobble near the surface. Eventually, this can become exacerbated, so I like to take advantage of the flare by using something that already has a taper, a piton. And so I've worked on my technique of placing drilled angles, and feel that over the long term, they're more likely to last.
By the time she reached the summit on Touchstone, Megan had a great introduction to big wall clean climbing from one of the masters, Levski. The skills she's gained should serve her well in her future climbing adventures.